Some people really don't know when to quit, do they? This entitled Karen actually tried to shake down the wrong guy for $40,000, just to move into my own house. When I refused to pay her ridiculous extortion, she lost her mind and called in reinforcements to kick me out of my own property. Big mistake. See, I've spent 30 years dealing with bullies who think they're untouchable. When her backup arrived, ready to arrest me for trespassing, I calmly reached for my wallet. What happened next? Let's just say their cocky attitudes disappeared real fast. Comment where you're watching this from. Let me tell you about the retirement that turned into the most satisfying takedown of my 30-year law enforcement career. I'm Detective Daniel Rivera, and after 3 decades of chasing down criminals, I thought I'd earn some peace and quiet by the lake. Boy, was I wrong about that. I had just purchased this gorgeous lakefront property in Lake Vista. We're talking about a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch, private dock, and mature oak trees that provided perfect shade for reading. After 30 years of dealing with the absolute worst humanity had to offer, I figured I deserved this slice of paradise. The paperwork was squeaky clean, permits were all in order, and I'd paid cash. What could possibly go wrong with that plan, right? Moving day arrives bright and early, and I'm directing the professional movers when this woman comes storming across the lawn like she personally owns the entire neighborhood. Picture this scene: perfectly coiffed blonde hair at 8 in the morning. And I mean not one strand out of place. Designer white pantsuit that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments, and she's clutching a clipboard like it's some kind of medieval weapon. The attitude radiating from this woman, bigger than the state of Texas, I'm telling you. Stop! She screams loud enough to wake the dead 3 counties over. Who authorized this move-in? I'm Donna Wellington, president of Lake Vista HOA for 15 years. Now I've dealt with plenty of entitled people in my career, but this woman had that special tone that just screams, I've never been told no in my entire privileged life. The movers actually stopped what they were doing, looking between me and this furious woman like they were watching the most dramatic tennis match in history. Ma'am, I'm Daniel Rivera, I said, still trying to direct traffic around the massive moving truck. I legally purchased this property last month. Everything's completely in order. But this Donna character wasn't having any of my reasonable explanations. Impossible, she shouts, waving her arms around like she's conducting some kind of insane symphony orchestra. Nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, moves into my lake community without going through me first. This is my domain. She's gesturing dramatically toward the lake, like she personally carved it out of the ground with her own bare hands and filled it with her own sweat and tears. I'm looking around the neighborhood and I notice something really interesting. There are neighbors peeking out of windows and standing on porches, but nobody's coming over to say hello or welcome me to the area. They're all keeping their distance, and they look genuinely nervous. That should have been my first major red flag, but I was still thinking like a peaceful retiree, not a trained detective. Then Donna pulls out this official-looking document with HOA letterhead, fancy gold seals, and her signature sprawled across the bottom, like she's signing some kind of royal decree. Mr. Rivera, she says, thrusting this paper at me like it's a legal summons from the Supreme Court. These fees are absolutely non-negotiable. No payment, no move-in, period. End of discussion. Final answer. I'm looking at this document with my trained investigative eye, and I immediately spot several major problems. Improper notarization that wouldn't hold up in court, missing county filing stamps that should be there, and language that doesn't match standard HOA terminology at all. But the numbers on this piece of paper, oh man, the numbers were absolutely something else entirely. Premium Lake Access Authorization, $18,000. Community Standards Compliance Bond, $12,000. Executive Security Services, $8,000. Wellington Administrative Processing, $2,000. Total due immediately, $40,000. Can you believe this absolute insanity, $40,000? I'm standing there thinking, lady, are you completely out of your mind? I've reviewed every single HOA document during the entire purchase process with a fine-tooth comb, and none of these ridiculous fees existed anywhere in the covenant bylaws or any other official documentation. Mrs. Wellington, I said calmly, handing back her little piece of creative fiction. I've reviewed all HOA documents during the purchase process. These specific fees aren't mentioned anywhere in the covenant or bylaws. That's when her carefully constructed mask started slipping off her face. Her voice went up about 3 full octaves. I don't care what some dusty old paperwork says. This is my lake, my community. I built this place from absolutely nothing. I decide who belongs here and who doesn't. Now I'm getting a much clearer picture of what I'm dealing with. This isn't just some overzealous HOA president with control issues. This is someone who is completely drunk on unchecked power used to intimidating regular people into total compliance through fear and threats. Mrs. Wellington, I said, keeping my voice calm and professional, like I'd learned in 30 years of dealing with criminals. I refuse to pay these fees. They appear to be unauthorized charges with absolutely no legal basis. This looks like attempted theft to me. Oh man, you should have seen her face when I said that word, refuse. It was like I'd physically slapped her with a wet fish right across her perfectly made-up face. The expensive makeup couldn't hide the pure rage flooding her features like a tsunami of fury. Theft, she screamed at maximum volume. How dare you accuse me of theft? Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know who my husband is? Here we go, I'm thinking to myself. Let me take a wild guess. He's someone really important and powerful, right? Your husband. I asked, genuinely curious about where this dramatic revelation was heading next. She leans in close enough that I can smell her expensive perfume, drops her voice to this dangerous whisper that's supposed to be intimidating. Sheriff Blake Wellington, 20 years in law enforcement. He runs this entire county with an iron fist, and I run this community the same way. Cross me, and you'll learn exactly what real power looks like in practice. Ah, there it is, the missing piece of this puzzle. Now I understand the complete setup they've got going here. This isn't just simple HOA overreach or bureaucratic power tripping. It's organized corruption with full law enforcement backing. The nervous neighbors, the completely fake fees, the direct threats. It all makes perfect sense now. My supposedly peaceful retirement just got a whole lot more interesting than I'd originally planned. Rivera, she says, straightening up and trying to regain her composure and authority. You have until sunset tonight to pay these fees in full and apologize publicly for your disrespectful attitude. Otherwise, you will absolutely not be moving into my lake community. I'll personally make sure of that promise. I looked her straight in the eye without blinking and said, Mrs. Wellington, I own this house completely legally. I will be moving in today with or without your so-called permission. The smile that slowly spread across her face was absolutely chilling to witness. We'll see about that, Mr. Rivera. We'll definitely see about that threat. She turned on those expensive heels and marched away, already pulling out her cell phone before she'd even left my property. I could hear her voice getting more agitated as she walked away. Blake, we have a problem at the lake. Big problem. Get here now. But what Daniel doesn't know is that Sheriff Blake Wellington has never lost a battle in his own county, and he's about to bring the full weight of his badge to crush this troublemaker. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA Karen. This is just the beginning. The harassment campaign started the very next morning, and let me tell you, these people didn't mess around when it came to psychological warfare. I woke up to discover all 4 of my truck tires had been slashed, and I'm talking about deep, deliberate cuts that absolutely guaranteed they couldn't be repaired. Someone had really taken their time with this vandalism. There was an anonymous note carefully tucked under my windshield wiper that read, "Last warning, pay or leave." The handwriting was obviously disguised, but the expensive cream-colored stationery with actual watermarks gave away who was behind this intimidation tactic. I mean, seriously. Who uses luxury paper for threatening notes? This woman was either incredibly arrogant or incredibly stupid, possibly both, which made her dangerous in unpredictable ways. By afternoon, I had my first official visitor, a city inspector with a clipboard and attitude problem, and what seemed like a personal grudge against my property. Got an anonymous complaint about unpermitted dock modifications. He announced like he was doing me some huge favor by showing up to harass me. I immediately produced all my permits properly filed and approved by the county months ago. The guy actually seemed disappointed that everything was completely legal and above board. Well, he muttered under his breath, guess someone got their wires crossed about this situation. Yeah, right. I'm sure it was just an innocent mistake and not targeted harassment at all. But the real systematic persecution started that evening with what I can only describe as the most ridiculous series of noise complaints in law enforcement history. 3 separate noise complaints got called in during my quiet unpacking session, and each one was more absurd than the last. The first patrol car showed up at exactly 6 p.m. for loud music disturbing the peace. I had a small radio playing classical music at barely audible levels. The responding officer took one look around my peaceful properties, realized how completely ridiculous this complaint was, and apologized profusely for bothering me. The second car arrived promptly at 8 p.m. for power tool usage after permitted hours. I was using a manual screwdriver to hang a single picture on my wall. The young officer actually laughed out loud when he saw what I was supposedly doing wrong. "Sorry, sir. Someone's obviously got it out for you in a big way." And the third patrol car rolled up at 10 p.m. for party disturbance with loud voices. I was sitting alone on my porch reading a book in complete silence. Each responding officer seemed more embarrassed than the last about these obviously false reports, but they were getting direct orders from somewhere up the chain of command, and those orders had to be followed, regardless of how stupid they were. I recognized this pattern immediately from my years in law enforcement. Systematic harassment designed to wear down the target until they gave up and moved away from the area. It's psychological warfare 101, and these people were using it like a textbook example. The message was crystal clear: comply with our demands or face endless harassment until you break down and surrender completely. The next morning, I decided to test the social waters with my new neighbors and see what kind of community I'd actually moved into. I approached this elderly woman who was carefully watering her absolutely beautiful prize roses, clearly well-maintained flowers that showed someone who took real pride in her gardening. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Daniel, your new neighbor." The reaction was immediate and extremely telling about the atmosphere of fear in this neighborhood. She startled, like I'd fired a gun right next to her ear, looked around nervously like she was checking for surveillance cameras, and stammered, "Oh, I can't talk to you. I'm sorry." Then she hurried inside her house, and I clearly heard the deadbolt click behind her door. That same exact reaction repeated itself with multiple neighbors throughout the day, people who obviously wanted to be friendly, but were absolutely terrified of the consequences. The young father washing his car in his driveway suddenly remembered urgent business inside his house the moment I waved hello. The teenager walking her golden retriever crossed the street to avoid passing my house entirely. Even the normally friendly dog seemed nervous and kept pulling away from me. These weren't unfriendly people by nature. They were genuinely terrified people living under some kind of oppressive system. I recognized these signs immediately from neighborhoods I'd investigated that were controlled by organized crime families. Everyone knew exactly who was in charge, and everyone understood the serious cost of crossing that authority structure. The fear was so thick you could practically cut it with a knife. Later that afternoon, I'm at the community mailbox sorting through the usual junk mail when I accidentally overhear Donna on her phone making what can only be described as a textbook extortion call. She's using that carefully controlled tone that people use when they're making direct threats, but trying to sound completely reasonable to anyone who might be listening. "No, Mr. Garcia. Your landscaping business is perfectly fine and legitimate. You just need to remember our monthly community support fee. $500 keeps everything running smoothly around here." There was a pause while she listened to his response. Then her voice developed that unmistakable steel edge that I'd heard before. "Because problems happen to businesses that don't support their community, Mr. Garcia. Permits get mysteriously delayed inspections, find unexpected issues, and customers start filing complaints about poor service. These things just happen when people don't show proper community support." I'm standing there pretending to be fascinated by credit card offers and grocery store circulars, but I'm getting a complete education in how this criminal operation actually functions on a daily basis. This wasn't just HOA tyranny or bureaucratic power tripping. It was a full-scale systematic protection racket operating under the convenient cover of community authority. They had perfected the art of making threats sound like helpful advice and extortion sound like voluntary community participation. It was actually quite sophisticated in its execution, which made it even more dangerous for the people trapped under their control. That evening brought my first official visit from the big man himself. And let me tell you, Sheriff Blake Wellington was clearly chosen for this job based on his intimidation factor. This guy showed up at my front door in full uniform, and he was built like a professional linebacker. 6'3", probably 250 pounds of pure muscle, the kind of imposing physical presence specifically designed to make regular people feel small and helpless. His hand was resting casually near his weapon, and he was using every single inch of his size advantage to crowd me and assert his dominance. "Mr. Rivera," he said in that official cop voice that carries extra authority, "I understand you've been harassing my wife and disrupting our peaceful community atmosphere. I kept my voice calm and professional, despite his obvious intimidation tactics. "Sheriff, I haven't harassed anyone. I simply refused to pay $40,000 in what appear to be completely unauthorized fees." He stepped closer, using his bulk to physically intimidate me in a way that would have worked on most regular citizens. "Unauthorized fees, Mr. Rivera? My wife is a respected community leader who was democratically elected by her neighbors. These are legitimate HOA assessments that were approved through proper legal procedures." The lies were flowing smoothly, delivered with complete confidence and authority. "Sheriff," I replied, "I'd be happy to review the actual voting records and legal documentation for these so-called assessments." That's when his friendly facade dropped, completely revealing the corrupt bully underneath. His voice turned hard as granite. "Mr. Rivera, let me be crystal clear about something. Lake Vista is a peaceful, well-ordered community that functions smoothly. My wife personally ensures it stays that way through her dedicated leadership. People who disrupt that peace and order find that life becomes very difficult very quickly around here." The threat was hanging in the air like smoke from a fire. "Is that a direct threat, Sheriff?" I asked calmly. He leaned in close enough that I could smell his aftershave. "It's a simple statement of fact about how things work in this county. Good evening, Mr. Rivera. Think very carefully about your next moves." But as Daniel hangs up, he has no idea that Donna has already prepared something that will destroy more than just his moving day. Something that could ruin his entire life. Echo Stories family. Tell us in the comments, what do you think Donna has planned? This gets so much worse. Saturday morning arrives and I'm pulling up to my house with the final truckload of belongings when I immediately realize this isn't going to be your typical neighborhood disagreement anymore. Donna's standing at the end of my driveway with 8 supporters, though looking at their faces, these people seem more terrified than supportive of her cause. They were clearly there because they'd been directly ordered to show up as human shields, not because they actually wanted to be part of this confrontation. "Stop right where you are!" Donna screams loud enough for the entire street to hear her voice echoing off the houses. "I warned you yesterday, you absolutely cannot move in without paying the required fees." I'm calmly starting to unload boxes from the truck while responding in my most reasonable voice. "Mrs. Wellington, I refuse your unauthorized demands. This is my house purchased completely legally." She's pacing back and forth like a caged wild animal. "It's not unauthorized. These are completely legitimate community standards. This is my lake, my community that I built from nothing." More neighbors are starting to emerge from their houses now, and I'm noticing something really interesting. Some of them have their phones out recording everything that's happening. This confrontation is turning into the most exciting Lake Vista has probably seen in decades, and you could feel the electricity in the air as people realized they were witnessing something historic. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, like everyone knew this moment would determine the future of their entire neighborhood. "Ma'am," I said while continuing to move my belongings. "Lakes aren't owned by individual people. Communities aren't ruled by self-appointed queens who make up their own laws." That comment was apparently the absolute last straw for Donna's carefully maintained facade of authority. Her composure crumbled completely into pure, unfiltered rage that was honestly shocking to witness. "How dare you say that to me?" she screamed. And I'm talking about full-volume, spit-flying, face-turning purple screaming that could probably be heard in the next county. I built this community from absolutely nothing. I protected these property values, I eliminated all the undesirable trash, I make the rules here, and nobody, I mean absolutely nobody, defies Donna Wellington and gets away with it. Her voice was cracking with fury. Her expensive designer outfit was getting rumpled from all the aggressive gesturing, and the mask of respectability was completely off now. This wasn't community leadership. This was a megalomaniacal control freak having a complete public breakdown in front of everyone. "You think you can just waltz in here like you own the place?" She continued her rant, pacing frantically back and forth. "Ignore my authority. Disrespect everything I've built over 15 years. You're absolutely nothing. A complete nobody trying to destroy my kingdom that I worked so hard to create." The whole time she's having this spectacular meltdown, I'm just methodically moving boxes from the truck to my front porch like nothing unusual is happening. My calm professionalism was making her hysteria look even more unhinged and ridiculous, and honestly, I was kind of enjoying watching her lose complete control in front of the whole neighborhood. The neighbors were coming out of their houses now, children peeking from behind their parents' teenagers recording everything for their social media accounts, elderly folks who probably hadn't seen this much drama since the Watergate hearings. Everyone was recognizing that they were witnessing the complete collapse of a tyrant, and you could physically feel the shift in the neighborhood atmosphere. For the first time in probably years, people were watching someone openly defy Donna Wellington, and she was absolutely losing her mind over the experience of not having total control. Then came what I can only describe as the nuclear option in this escalating conflict. Donna pulled out her phone with hands that were literally shaking from rage, and I mean visibly trembling. She was that furious about this situation, and dialed her husband's number. "Blake," she screamed into the phone loud enough that half the neighborhood could hear her side of the conversation. "Get here right now. That Rivera man is moving in anyway. He's trespassing on community property. He's harassing me in public. He absolutely refuses to follow our established rules." Yet I could actually hear Blake's voice through the phone speaker asking her to calm down and explain the situation more clearly, which just made her even more agitated and frantic. "Donna, calm down and tell me exactly what's happening. I'll be there in 5 minutes with backup officers." She turned to address the growing crowd of neighbors with this triumphant expression on her face. "You all heard that sheriff's coming with full backup support. You'll all learn exactly what happens when people disrespect the Wellington family authority." She spun back toward me with victory gleaming in her eyes. "You have exactly 5 minutes to pack up your belongings and leave voluntarily, or my husband will arrest you for trespassing, harassment, and disturbing the peace of our community." By this point, we had quite an impressive audience gathering to watch this drama unfold. More neighbors were emerging from their houses, some recording everything on their phones, others just standing and staring in absolute fascination at this unprecedented confrontation. Parents were hustling their small children indoors while simultaneously trying to get a good view of the show that was unfolding. Dog walkers were stopping in their tracks to watch. Morning joggers were slowing down to see what all the commotion was about. And this was rapidly becoming the neighborhood event of the decade. I heard Mrs. White, the elderly woman with the beautiful roses, whisper to another neighbor, "Maybe this time someone will finally stand up to her tyranny." A young father quickly shushed her. "Shh, Donna will hear you and make your life miserable." But there was something definitely different in the air today. For the first time in what was probably 15 years, people were watching someone openly defy Donna Wellington and not immediately cave under her pressure and threats. Fear was slowly being replaced by curiosity, and curiosity was the absolute beginning of hope for these oppressed residents. Donna kept ranting while we all waited for her law enforcement cavalry to arrive. 15 years, 15 years. I've protected this community, kept out all the criminals and undesirable elements, maintained our high standards and property values, and this absolute nobody thinks he can just ignore everything I've accomplished here. The sound of multiple police sirens started getting louder and closer, and Donna's excitement was building to a fever pitch. "Here they come," she announced to the crowd like she was introducing the main act at a 3-ring circus. Sheriff Blake Wellington arrived with 2 full patrol cars, complete with flashing lights, wailing sirens, the whole overwhelming show of force designed to intimidate not just me, but every single neighbor who was watching this confrontation unfold. Blake stepped out of his vehicle in full uniform, hand resting prominently on his weapon, using every bit of his imposing physical presence to assert dominance over the situation. "What's the situation here?" he asked in his official voice, though his tone suggested he already knew exactly what his wife had told him was happening. "Blake," Donna rushed over to him like he was some kind of superhero arriving to save the day. "This man is absolutely trespassing. He refuses to follow HOA regulations. He's been harassing me all week. Arrest him immediately." Blake looked directly at me with that official cop voice that was designed to carry to the entire crowd. "Mr. Rivera, I specifically warned you about causing problems in our peaceful community." I kept my voice calm and reasonable. "Sheriff, I'm simply moving into my legally purchased home. I'm not trespassing on my own property that I own." And that's when Blake pulled out what he clearly thought was his trump card. "According to established HOA regulations, you cannot occupy this residence until all required fees are paid in full." The crowd was murmuring now, phones recording every word. And this was either going to end with me being arrested in front of everyone, or something else entirely was about to happen that would change everything forever. "Sheriff," I said, "before I show my ID, I should mention, you might want to send your deputies back to their patrol cars." This could get embarrassing for you." Blake looked confused and annoyed. "Embarrassing? What are you talking about? Just show me your ID." Daniel reaches into his wallet, knowing that what he's about to reveal will not just shock everyone present, it will destroy the Wellington Empire forever. But he has no idea that Blake has one final card to play that could turn this entire situation upside down. Comment below, what do you think is in Daniel's wallet, and what could Blake possibly do to save himself now? This is it, the moment I'd been building toward since Donna first tried to shake me down for $40,000. Time seemed to slow down to cinematic pace as my hand moved with deliberate precision toward my wallet. The entire neighborhood was holding its collective breath. Children peeking between their parents' legs, teenagers recording everything for posterity, elderly residents witnessing what might be the end of 15 years of tyranny. Donna's eyes were gleaming with anticipated victory, practically vibrating with excitement over what she thought was going to be my complete humiliation. Blake stood there confident in his authority, his backup officers flanking him like some kind of small-town army. This was their moment, the moment they would crush another challenger and remind everyone who really ran Lake Vista. I opened my wallet with what I can only describe as ceremonial precision, like I was performing some kind of sacred ritual. Every movement was deliberate, calculated to build maximum tension. I wasn't just pulling out an ID card, I was about to detonate a bomb that would level their entire operation. I decided to have a little fun with this, so instead of handing it directly to Blake, I gave it to Deputy Smith first, the youngest officer, clearly junior rank. This wasn't an accident. I knew exactly what I was doing. Junior officers react more honestly than veterans who've learned to hide their surprise. Their genuine shock would be more convincing to the crowd watching this unfold. Smith looked down at my ID card, studied it for what felt like an eternity, and I watched his face transform completely. The color drained from his features like water from a broken dam. His hands began trembling visibly, and his mouth fell open in pure disbelief. "Oh my God," Smith whispered, barely audible but loud enough for the crowd to hear his shock. "Sheriff, you really need to see this." Blake was getting annoyed, still playing to the crowd and maintaining his authority. "What's the problem, Smith? Just read me his name and any warrants." Smith was stammering now, sweat visible on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Sheriff, please, you need to look at this yourself, right now." The crowd was sensing something major happening, phone cameras zooming in, even Donna starting to look concerned about why this was taking so long. "What could possibly be so complicated about reading an ID?" she demanded, though I noticed her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. The shift in Deputy Smith's demeanor was so dramatic that even the neighbors watching from their porches could tell something significant was happening. Blake, irritated and probably embarrassed that his simple arrest was turning into a drawn-out drama, snatched the ID card from Smith's trembling hands. "Give me that. What could possibly—" He looked down and stopped mid-sentence. I watched his confident expression melt like ice cream in August sun. His face went white as fresh snow. The ID card began trembling in his hand like a leaf in a hurricane, and his mouth moved soundlessly like a fish out of water. The transformation was so complete, so dramatic, that even people watching from across the street could see that Sheriff Blake Wellington's world had just been turned upside down. State Police, Criminal Investigation Division, Detective Daniel Rivera, badge number 7742, 30 years service. Those words might as well have been a death sentence for the Wellington operation. The crowd was murmuring now, sensing the shift in power, but not understanding exactly what was happening. Donna was still clueless, getting increasingly impatient with the delay in her anticipated triumph. "What is it? What's wrong? Why aren't you arresting him? What's taking so long?" That's when I decided it was time to end this charade. I spoke in my calm, authoritative voice that carried to every corner of the growing crowd. "Sheriff Wellington, I'm State Police Detective Daniel Rivera, a 30-year veteran. I have higher authority than you do." The collective gasp from the neighborhood was audible. Phone cameras were going crazy, capturing every second of what would become the most talked about moment in Lake Vista history. This was the moment everyone would remember for the rest of their lives. The moment the tyrants got their comeuppance. Blake was stammering like a schoolchild caught cheating on a test. "Detective, we didn't know. Nobody told us." But Donna was finally understanding what was happening, and her reaction was exactly what you'd expect from someone whose entire world was crashing down around her. "You're a cop," she shrieked at maximum volume. "That's not fair. You lied to us. You tricked us." I turned to address the growing crowd of neighbors who were witnessing the collapse of 15 years of oppression. Neighbors, I apologize for the secrecy. I came here to retire, but when I saw obvious corruption and people being forced to pay illegal fees, I couldn't ignore it. The relief on people's faces was visible. After years of fear and intimidation, they were finally seeing someone with the authority to stand up to the Wellingtons. Mrs. Wellington, I said calmly, I simply didn't mention my job. When someone tries to force me to pay $40,000 in fake fees, I investigate. Blake made one desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Detective Rivera, maybe we can work this out between professionals. But I wasn't interested in giving him an easy way out. Sheriff Wellington, you threatened a police officer and helped your wife steal money from residents. That's serious criminal behavior. The crowd was realizing they had been watching corruption unfold for years, and the brave ones started stepping closer, no longer afraid of the people who had terrorized them for so long. Mrs. White stepped forward, courage finally overcoming fear. Detective Rivera, thank you. We've been afraid for so long. She made us pay thousands we couldn't afford. Other neighbors were beginning to speak up, their voices growing stronger as they realized the nightmare was finally over. She forced me to pay $8,000 for landscaping compliance. My business almost failed because of her protection fees. I was too scared to fight back. Then came Donna's complete nuclear meltdown. She was screaming at maximum volume, completely unhinged. This isn't fair. This is my lake, my community. I've been queen here for 15 years. You can't do this to me. I built this place, I rule here. Her mascara was running, her perfect hair was disheveled, and her designer outfit was wrinkled from frantic gesturing. She looked like exactly what she was, a delusional tyrant watching her kingdom crumble. Mrs. Wellington, I said with ice-cold finality, lakes aren't owned, communities aren't kingdoms, and you're not a queen. You're a criminal who has been stealing from your neighbors. I pulled out my phone for the final blow. I have recordings of your threats and demands for illegal payments. This evidence has been sent to my superiors. Blake realized his 20-year career was over, ending in handcuffs and disgrace. The crowd began to disperse as reality set in. They were finally free from 15 years of tyranny. Spontaneous applause erupted. People were crying with relief, and children were sensing something important had happened, even if they didn't understand exactly what. The nightmare is over, folks, I announced to the celebrating crowd. Your community belongs to you again. But as the dust settles and neighbors begin to celebrate, none of them realize that this victory has just painted a target on Daniel's back. Donna's connections run deeper than anyone imagined, and her revenge is already being planned from behind bars. Echo Stories, viewers, what did you think of that badge reveal? Share your reaction in the comments. The immediate aftermath of my badge reveal was unlike anything I'd experienced in 30 years of law enforcement. Word spread through Lake Vista faster than wildfire, and within an hour, news vans were pulling up to document what was already being called the biggest HOA corruption scandal in state history. I found myself surrounded by neighbors I'd never met, all sharing stories that painted a picture of systematic abuse I never could have imagined. White, the elderly woman who'd been too terrified to talk to me just days earlier, was now telling me through tears how she'd been paying $300 monthly in landscaping compliance fees for 2 years. Money that came directly from her medication budget. Can you imagine? This woman was choosing between her heart medication and Donna's fake fees because she was too scared to say no. A young father approached me with documents showing how his small landscaping business had nearly collapsed because Donna demanded $2,000 monthly for a commercial vehicle parking permit, just for parking his work truck in his own driveway. Detective Rivera, he said, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and relief. I thought about moving away, selling the business, anything to escape her demands. I never imagined anyone could stand up to the Wellingtons and win. The systematic theft was becoming clear. This wasn't just about one-time extortion fees. Donna and Blake had been running an ongoing protection racket that generated hundreds of thousands of dollars annually from terrified residents who had absolutely nowhere else to turn. Every story I heard made me more furious about how these people had been terrorized in their own neighborhood. Blake Wellington made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation by playing the jurisdiction card. Detective Rivera, this is still a county matter. You might outrank me, but you don't have jurisdiction over local HOA disputes. I looked at him with the contempt he deserved. Sheriff Wellington, when you accepted bribes, threatened residents, and violated civil rights under the color of authority, this became a state matter. Your jurisdiction ended the moment you became a criminal. He tried switching to a personal appeal, his voice getting more desperate. Danny, Detective Rivera, look, maybe things got out of hand, but nobody's really hurt here. We can make restitution work something out between professionals. The audacity of this man was astounding. Blake, I said, you threatened me in my own home. Your wife stole money from elderly residents living on fixed incomes. Mrs. White was choosing between medication and your wife's fake fees. That's not getting out of hand. That's organized crime. Meanwhile, Donna was continuing her complete psychological breakdown, becoming increasingly unhinged as she watched her empire crumble in real time. This isn't over. You think this is over. You have connections. I have friends in high places. I'll destroy you like I destroyed all the others. The desperation in her voice was almost pitiful, but I wasn't feeling particularly sympathetic towards someone who had been terrorizing elderly people for their medication money. Mrs. Wellington, I replied calmly, your only connection now should be with a lawyer. She turned to the crowd of neighbors who were no longer afraid of her. Don't you dare abandon me. I protected you. I kept out the criminals. I maintained your property values. That's when Mrs. White found her courage and spoke truth to power. You are the criminal Donna. You stole our money and made us afraid in our own homes. Other voices started joining in, and the floodgates of truth opened completely. You charged my disabled son $500 for excessive outdoor equipment, his wheelchair ramp. You made us pay $1,200 for unauthorized cultural decorations, our Christmas lights. You threatened to have my husband arrested for parking in our own driveway. As neighbors gained confidence, even more evidence started pouring out. Tony, one of the residents, stepped forward with a stack of documents. Detective, I have all the payment records. Donna required cash only. No checks, no receipts. Always said it was for community improvements that never happened. A young mother named Emily pulled out her phone. I've been secretly recording HOA meetings for 2 years. Donna threatened anyone who questioned expenses or asked to see budgets. I was realizing this was bigger than simple extortion. It was systematic financial abuse of an entire community. In a moment of complete panic, Blake made what might have been the stupidest decision of his law enforcement career. He turned to his deputies. Harris Smith, we're leaving. This is above our pay grade. Deputy Smith looked confused. Sheriff, shouldn't we take statements, file reports? No, Blake shouted. We're not getting involved in this mess. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sheriff Wellington, I said, instructing your deputies to ignore evidence of crimes makes you an accessory after the fact. You're digging your hole deeper every time you open your mouth. I could see Blake realize that his attempt to escape had actually made everything infinitely worse. His own deputies were looking at him with suspicion and disgust, probably wondering how long their boss had been corrupt and what other criminal activity they'd been unknowingly covering for. For the first time in 15 years, Lake Vista residents were speaking freely, and the stories kept getting worse. Mrs. White explained how they'd tried to complain to authorities before, but Blake always dismissed HOA complaints as civil disputes and refused to investigate. Tony revealed that anyone who complained too loudly faced months of harassment, surprise inspections, bogus citations, anonymous complaints about everything from grass height to mailbox colors. Emily showed me a list on her phone. Donna kept a problem residents list. Anyone who made it onto that list faced daily harassment until they either paid up or moved away. And when I asked how many families had been forced to move, the collective answer shocked me. At least 12 in the past 5 years. These people had been running a reign of terror that had destroyed families and scattered a community. Folks, I addressed the growing crowd. What happened here isn't just HOA overreach. It's organized racketeering that destroyed families and terrorized an entire community for over a decade. The media crews were capturing everything, and I knew this story was going to make headlines across the state, possibly nationally. That's when Donna played her final, most desperate card. Detective Rivera, you want the truth. I'll give you the truth. This goes higher than you think. County commissioners, state legislators, they all knew I have records. She was literally confessing to a broader conspiracy on camera, apparently thinking this would somehow help her case. Mrs. Wellington, I replied. If you have evidence of additional corruption, that's a conversation for your lawyer and prosecutors. The look of realization on her face when she understood what she'd just admitted was priceless. Blake finally accepted defeat and asked the question I'd been waiting for. "What happens now?" "Sheriff Wellington," I said, "you'll be arrested and charged with conspiracy civil rights violations and accepting bribes. Your wife faces additional charges for theft and racketeering." I watched him remove his badge, 20 years of service ending in handcuffs and disgrace. "Blake," I said, "you threw away 20 years the moment you chose corruption over justice." The crowd began to disperse as reality set in. They were finally free from 15 years of tyranny. But as neighbors headed home to celebrate their liberation, none of them noticed the black sedan that had been watching from across the lake. What they don't know is that this victory has reached the wrong ears. The Wellington operation was a small part of a much larger network, and the people who profit from HOA corruption across multiple states are now very interested in Detective Daniel Rivera. Think this is really over? Comment what you think is coming next. The real power brokers don't like losing their operations. 6 months later, I'm standing on the federal courthouse steps, watching justice finally being served. The cameras are rolling as the court clerk reads the verdicts that everyone in Lake Vista has been waiting to hear. Blake Wellington, former sheriff, sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for conspiracy civil rights violations and racketeering. Donna Wellington was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for theft, extortion, and leading a criminal organization. The local news reporter turns to the camera. The Wellington HOA corruption case has become a model for federal legislation targeting HOA abuse nationwide. I'm watching from those courthouse steps, finally seeing real justice served, after months of investigation that revealed over $800,000 stolen from residents, through fake fees, forced payments, and systematic harassment campaigns that had destroyed families and scattered a community. Lake Vista is a completely different place now, and I mean that in the best possible way. We have a new HOA board that was actually elected democratically. Can you imagine that Mrs. White serves as president, Tony serves as treasurer, and Emily heads up our new transparency committee that posts all financial records online every month? No more secret fees, no more mysterious expenses, no more fear. The first official act of our new board was a complete audit of all fees charged over the past 5 years, with full restitution to victims paid from the seized Wellington assets. Mrs. White stood up at our first community meeting, and I'm talking about a real community meeting where people actually felt safe to speak, and said something I'll never forget. No more queens, no more kingdoms, just neighbors helping neighbors. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The victim recovery stories still amaze me every time I hear them. Tony came up to me just last week. "Detective Rivera, my family got back $18,000 in illegal fees. My kids can actually go to college now. Emily used her restitution money to help install a playground and community garden. Things Donna had claimed the fees were for, but never actually built. An elderly resident named Mr. Peterson told me I was planning to sell my house because I couldn't afford Donna's demands anymore. Now I can stay in the home where my wife and I lived for 30 years. These are real people whose lives were genuinely destroyed by the Wellington operation, and seeing them get their lives back has been more rewarding than any arrest I made in 30 years of law enforcement. The state police commissioner presented me with a Distinguished Service Award, which was nice, but honestly the recognition belongs to every resident of Lake Vista who found the courage to speak truth after years of intimidation. In my acceptance speech, I made sure to say exactly that. This award belongs to every resident of Lake Vista who found the courage to speak truth after years of intimidation. They're the real heroes in this story. And the media attention has been absolutely incredible. Our Karen Queen versus Detective story went viral worldwide, with the video of my badge reveal hitting over 2 million views. The comments are hilarious. "This is why you don't mess with people you don't know." That moment when she realized she picked the wrong target, priceless. Justice served ice cold. Can this detective clean up our HOA next? Speaking of which, my success here in Lake Vista has inspired investigations in 12 other states. There's actually a federal HOA crime task force now, and they asked me to serve as a consultant. Who knew that standing up to one corrupt HOA president would lead to something this big? I testified before Congress about HOA reform. HOA corruption thrives in darkness. Transparency and accountability are the best disinfectants. They have passed what they're calling Wellington laws, requiring financial transparency and eliminating arbitrary fee authority. It's amazing how one small victory can create ripples that spread across the entire country. But the best part of all this, I'm finally getting to enjoy the retirement I earned after 30 years of chasing criminals. Morning coffee on my dock, afternoon reading evening walks with neighbors who are actually friends now instead of terrified strangers. Lake Vista has become a model community where people genuinely support each other instead of living in fear of arbitrary authority. Kids are playing freely around the lake, parents are chatting without constantly looking over their shoulders, and we have community barbecues every weekend where everyone's welcome. It's what a neighborhood should be, people caring about each other instead of one person controlling everyone else. Just last month, a young couple with a newborn baby approached me at our weekly community barbecue. The father said, "Detective Rivera, we heard what you did here. Thank you for making this a safe place to raise our children. Our realtor actually warned us that Lake Vista used to be a problem HOA, but now it's our dream community." His wife added, "Our baby is going to grow up in a place where people protect each other instead of abusing power. That's an incredible gift." Moments like that remind me why I spent 30 years in law enforcement. It was never about the arrests or the recognition. It was always about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. The thank you cards I've received from across the country still amaze me. Families who heard my story found the courage to challenge their own corrupt HOAs. 12 criminal investigations have been launched, 43 HOA officials have been arrested, and over $3 million have been returned to victims nationwide. An 89-year-old veteran from Arizona wrote, "Detective Rivera, your courage inspired me to fight back against our crooked HOA president. He's in jail now, and we got our community back. Thank you for showing us the way." These letters remind me that sometimes one person standing up can inspire others to find their own courage. The Evening News ran a special report about our case. The Rivera HOA case sparked federal legislation requiring criminal background checks for HOA board members and establishing resident rights protection. The legal analyst said, "This case proves that individual courage can challenge systematic corruption and create lasting change." Our community newsletter ran a headline that still makes me smile. Lake Vista celebrates 1 year of freedom, from fear to fellowship. The article mentioned that property values have increased 15% since the Wellington arrests, not because of intimidation, but because people actually want to live in a supportive community. There's now a months-long waiting list for homes in Lake Vista. Sitting on my dock at sunset watching the sky paint the lake in gold and crimson, I often reflect on this unexpected retirement adventure. 30 years of chasing criminals taught me that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about restoration. These neighbors didn't need a savior. They needed someone to remind them they had power all along. They just needed to see that bullies, no matter how much authority they think they have, are still just bullies when someone finally stands up to them. My phone rings as I'm watching the sunset, and the caller ID shows an unknown number. "Detective Rivera, this is Maria from Phoenix. I know you're retired, but we have a situation with our HOA president. He's stolen over $4 million from our retirement community, targeting elderly veterans specifically. An 89-year-old Korean War veteran asked me to call you personally. He said he heard about Lake Vista and needs someone who understands how to fight this kind of corruption. Should I look across the peaceful lake where children are playing safely, where neighbors chat without fear, where community thrives instead of just survives? Maria, I say, tell me about Phoenix. But what Daniel doesn't know is that his Lake Vista victory has already reached the wrong ears. Powerful people who profit from HOA corruption across the country, and they're about to make sure Daniel Rivera's next case will be his last. So, there you have it. Sometimes the biggest bullies are just cowards hiding behind fake authority.